Hello, my name is Sophie Rain and I'm a PhD student in the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University. The aim of this session is to get you to critically analyse the way interruptions are used as a dramatic device by Priestley in An Inspector Calls. The subtle technique is used by Priestley to show the distribution of power in the Birling home, reveal relationships between characters and also create atmosphere. This close reading analysis is an example of some of the types of tasks you may be required to do if you chose to study English at university. I want you to try and think of conversation in terms of rules. For your first activity, turn to page 6 of your workbook. Imagine you have just met an alien who wants to interact with humans. Write down 4 rules for conversation. Next to each rule, write, why is the rule important, and what are the consequences of breaking this particular rule? So take some time to complete this task now. Pause the recording and press play when you're ready to continue. There are several rules that you might have thought of during this task, such as not talking too much or being impolite. For consequences of breaking social rules, you might have put causing offence, being misunderstood, or seeming rude. Harold Grice was a British philosopher of language and came up with 4 key rules for conversation, which he referred to as conversational maxims. The idea behind these rules was to promote effective and polite conversation. So just going through each of these. The first one was quality, in which you don't say things which are false or that you believe to be false. Number 2 was quantity, so ensure you provide the correct amount of information. Number 3 was relation, so everything you say must be relevant. And 4 was manner, so be clear, concise, orderly, and avoid ambiguity. So Grice has found that many people flouted these rules and was interested in studying why. For this session, we're going to look at some of these conversational maxims, particularly manner, as this is important when we look at how Priestley uses interruption. So now we know what polite and ordered communication consists of, it's time to look at the use of interruption. Interruption goes against Grice's ideas, as it's not orderly and ignores the idea of turn-taking. Interruption can also occur when someone has talked for too long and resists more natural interruptions or diversions in conversation. In An Inspector Calls, the characters interrupt each other constantly, and this allows Priestley to achieve several different effects. So it signifies important entrances, creates dramatic tension, creates tension between the characters, controls the narrative and sequence of events, and also allows for characters to establish their authority. One of the first interruptions comes from Eric at the start of the play. Eric's interruption comes during a light-hearted argument between Sheila and Gerald. Take some time to have a look at this brief extract. In your workbook, write down your response to these questions. Why does Eric laugh at Sheila and Gerald's squabble? And what does this interruption reveal about Eric? Take some time to complete this task now and press play when you're ready to continue. The interruption signals Eric's drunkenness to the audience, as well as his attention-seeking nature. We also get this impression that the joke is actually rather bitter. The interruption indicates the family strain which already exists, creating tension in the room. And the fact that Eric doesn't divulge why he's laughing shows there's an element of secrecy in the household, and the family members aren't open about their thoughts and feelings. Let's move on now to Mr. Birling. Prior to the inspector's arrival, Mr. Birling dominates the conversation as others attempt, unsuccessfully, to interrupt him. Look at the 2 examples here. Now, take some time to write down which of Grice's conversation maxims you think Mr. Birling is guilty of breaking and why. This is activity 3 in your workbook. So take some time to complete this task now. Press play when you're ready to continue. In the first example, it's clear that Mr. Birling is not interested in a conversation. He instead chooses to lecture the other dinner guests. Interruptions can serve as a way to try and redirect conversations. Mrs. Birling also shows signs of interrupting and is aware of how he is currently breaking social norms by being overly talkative. In both instances, Birling is breaking the maxim of manner, which encourages brevity and turn-taking, as he's not allowing others to speak and is talking incessantly. In the middle of Birling's speech, the doorbell rings, signifying the arrival of the inspector. The timeliness of this entrance is very important for showing how the entrance of the inspector will change the course of the narrative. Birling is in the middle of dismissing socialism and stating how Gerald and Eric need to only look after themselves. The inspector's interruption acts as an objection. We learn soon enough that he completely disagrees with Birling's opinions. The doorbell being sharp makes the entrance more dramatic and sets up the inspector as a figure of authority. This is also one of the rare instances where Mr. Birling actually listens. This is mirrored in the ending where the telephone rings again, silencing the family. Birling is finally successfully interrupted by the inspector in the following exchange. So Birling says rather impatiently, yes, horrid business, but I don't understand why you should come here, Inspector. And as we see, the inspector cuts through massively. Consider what this interruption reveals about the inspector. For the next activity, write down any impressions that you have of the inspector from this extract around the mind map in your workbook for activity 4. You may want to think about how he presents himself and why this is important to the narrative. So take some time to complete this task now and press play when you're ready to continue. In this extract, we are shown the inspector's authority. He refuses to be bullied or talked over by Birling and is confident enough to interrupt him as he takes command of the room. This is something that other family members have been unable to do so far. It is clear the inspector is in control of this situation and indicates the power of the household has switched from Birling to the inspector, suggesting also that the narrative and the inquiry will now be controlled by him. The inspector throughout insists on having one line of inquiry at a time. Why do you think this is? Take some time to think about this and write down your response. This will be under activity 5 in your workbook. So take some time to complete this task now and press play when you're ready to continue. The inspector has complete control over the inquiry and this structures the narrative. The other characters try to interrupt and skip their turn, trying to defy the maxim of manner, which requires people to be orderly in conversation. The inspector refuses to let them interrupt and divert his investigation. This is of particular importance as these characters are used to being heard and now they have to be patient and follow orders. By not allowing them to interrupt, the inspector controls the power dynamics in the room. Another reason for these interruptions is creating dramatic tension, as we can see in Act 2, where Sheila begs her mother to stop talking. Mrs. Birling, however, refuses to listen. As we see here from the extract on the screen, Sheila interrupts Mrs. Birling during her interrogation in an attempt to try and stop her from accidentally condemning Eric. These interruptions signal Sheila's desperation as she's realised, with the audience, that Eric is the father of Eva's baby. This serves as dramatic irony as Mrs. Birling is oblivious to her daughter's hints, instead reprimanding Sheila for her emotional state and rudeness. The interruptions here go unheard as Mrs. Birling, as a domineering character, refuses to be spoken over. Interruptions can therefore be essential and denote panic and urgency. So here are just some final thoughts on the interruptions in An Inspector Calls. So interruptions can be used to change the direction of the plot and establish and develop characters. There is a dramatic function to interruptions. And considering turn-taking, interruptions and other conversational maxims are a good indicator of power dynamics in the play. Priestley shows through the inspector the importance of communication in commanding respect. And by altering the communication in the Birling household, the inspector allows voices other than Mr. Birling's to be heard. Thank you for listening to this session on interruptions in An Inspector Calls. I hope this has shown you the many ways that dialogue can be used to provide a rich analysis of texts. For more information about studying English literature at Lancaster University, please visit the website on the screen. Many thanks. Further titles in this series include Hysterical Women, Morality, and Public versus Private.